PastNowRead presents another story that must be told, Hanging by a Thread. Enjoy. On the edge, Mia's fingertips screamed in pain as they dug into a razor-thin ledge of cold granite. She dangled from the sheer rock face, one arm fully extended overhead and straining to hold her weight, legs scrabbling against the vertical wall in search of any bit of friction. Far below her boots, the Rocky Mountains dropped away into a dizzying chasm of pine forest and fading daylight. Pebbles dislodged by her desperate movements skittered noiselessly into the abyss, leaving her with only the sound of her own ragged breathing and the thunder of her heartbeat in her ears. She had been in tough spots on climbs before, but never like this. Never so close to the edge, literally hanging between life and death with nothing but her willpower and a few millimeters of rock preventing a fatal plunge. Her right forearm burned with lactic acid from exertion, muscles quivering uncontrollably as she clung on. "Don't panic," she ordered herself, though terror was already constricting her chest. She tried to adjust her grip slightly, and felt the sharp granite bite deeper into her calloused fingers, sending another jolt of pain up her arm. A whimper escaped her lips before she could choke it back. Mia cursed under her breath, a mix of anger and fear. She was furious at the rock, at her own exhaustion, but mostly at herself for getting into this situation. "Why did I do this?" she thought. Teeth gritted as she fought for purchase with her left foot on a tiny nub of rock. Her climbing shoes' rubber smeared against the wall, barely holding. Her toe muscles cramped inside the tight shoe, and she could feel the tremor in her calf. She shifted slightly, pressing her body closer to the cliff to relieve her screaming fingers for a second. Even that slight motion made the wall feel like it was peeling her off, gravity ravenous and unforgiving. The wind picked up, a sudden gust sweeping across the face of the mountain and tugging at the loose strands of Mia's brown hair that had fallen from her braid. She pressed her cheek to the rough stone, clinging like a terrified barnacle as the gust subsided. Grit scraped her skin. The temperature at this altitude was dropping with the sun, and Mia could feel the chill starting to seep through her thin tank top and into her sweat-soaked skin. She blinked salty sweat out of her eyes and dared a quick glance upward. Above her, perhaps 2 feet out of reach, loomed a small protrusion, a thicker ledge, maybe even a break in the wall where she could possibly rest. It might as well have been 2 miles away. She knew her strength was ebbing by the second. Her clinging hand was going numb and her left hand dangled free, chalky and useless, waiting for a chance to latch on to something. But there was nothing else to grab, just the blank rock and that next hold frustratingly beyond her reach. Her mind was racing as fast as her pulse. She tried to remember the route she had planned in her head. There had been a crack system, some decent holds, but she had strayed offline. In her haste and despair, she had ascended too far to one side, chasing easier holds that led her into this corner of the cliff with no easy exit. Stupid. She berated herself silently, her vision blurring for a moment as tears of frustration welled up. This is how people die, Mia, alone and off route. The truth of it came crashing down on her with a cold clarity. If she couldn't find a way out of this in the next minute or two, she would lose her grip. The thought sent a spike of panic through her, adrenaline surging in response. Her heart jackhammered against her ribs. For a split second, the world tilted, and she felt the void yawning beneath her more acutely than ever. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her body flat to the wall again, forcing the dizziness away. Don't look down. She knew that rule. Yet, the temptation to glance at the drop was almost masochistic. Part of her brain taunted, "Go on, see what's waiting if you fail." Gritting her teeth so hard her jaw ached, Mia opened her eyes and looked downward against her better judgment. Immediately, vertigo swirled in her stomach. The ground was a cruel distance below, a patchwork of jagged boulders and trees that looked like mere broccoli florets from here. Her old truck was a tiny speck at the base of the mountain, where she'd left it this morning when everything still seemed manageable. Seeing it now, so far away, made her throat clench. It wasn't just fear. It was the sudden reminder of why she was here in the first place, of what had driven her up this lonely mountain wall. Her vision blurred again, but not from tears of frustration this time. tears of heartbreak she'd been holding back since before the climb. High above the world, clinging to life by her fingertips, Mia felt the first wrenching sob bubble up in her chest. It was absurd and dangerous to cry now, but the emotion was too strong to be damned any longer. As her body fought for survival, her heart ached with a pain that almost rivaled the burn in her arms. The breakup, the fight, the words that had driven her to flee into these peaks with reckless abandon. All of it was flooding back now, sharp and bitter. Mia shook her head fiercely, as if she could physically shake away the memories threatening to overwhelm her. A few tears flew off into the wind. "Focus," she scolded herself. But the past was seeping into the edges of her mind like the cold seeping into her bones. The aching in her chest was becoming as tangible as the cramp in her forearms. Her foot slipped half an inch, startling her back to the present. She gasped and clung tighter, every muscle seizing up. For one horrifying moment, her fingertips lost contact with the ledge, but by some miracle, her left hand shot up and slapped against the rock, catching the narrow lip just as her right hand gave out. Now her left hand bore her full weight, fingers splayed and locked on the tiny hold for dear life. She let out a cry between a scream and a groan, the sudden strain on her left shoulder agonizing. Breathing hard, she managed to swing her right hand back up, latching onto the ledge again next to her left. Now she hung by both hands, arms straining, her body pressed to the rock. That was too close, way too close. A hot flush of fear coursed through her body, mingling with the raw exertion. Her fingers felt like they were inside a vice, crushed by her grip on the sharp ledge, but she didn't dare relax even a fraction. Dangling there, arms shaking, Mia felt something shift in her consciousness. The nearness of death in that slip snuffed out all extraneous thought for a second. Survival instinct roared in her like a caged animal. She bared her teeth, let out a guttural sound that was half snarl, half sob, animal fear and determination. This mountain would not take her without a fight. For a moment she found a precarious equilibrium, her two hands sharing the load, her right toe barely sticking on that tiny nubbin of rock again. It wasn't sustainable, but it was something. In that moment of relative stasis, fragments of memory pushed at the corners of her mind again, unbidden. She knew she couldn't afford distraction, but the images came anyway, as unstoppable as the setting sun. As Mia fought to maintain her grip, her breath coming in quick, shallow bursts, the first flashback hit her with the force of a punch to the gut. Jake's face, eyes full of hurt and frustration, as he spoke the words that had broken her heart just last night. Flashback, the breakup. Earlier, in the dim light of Mia's farmhouse kitchen, Jake stood with his hands braced on the wooden table, his face contorted in frustration. Mia remembered every detail. The smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air, the low hum of the refrigerator, and the way Jake's voice trembled as he tried to keep it steady. "I can't do this anymore, Mia," he said quietly, each word like a stone dropping into a still pond. He wasn't yelling. That was the worst part, how tired and defeated he sounded. Jake, with the sandy hair that flopped into his eyes and the easy smile that had first drawn her in, now looked at her with a pain that cut deeper than any sharp rock ever could. It's not working." Mia stood rigid on the other side of the kitchen, arms crossed tightly over her chest as if that could hold all her cracked pieces together. Her heart began to thud dully, a slow prelude to the shattering she sensed was coming. "What are you saying?" she managed to ask, though she understood perfectly. She just needed to hear it aloud, maybe in hopes that the words would make it real or give her something to fight against. Jake exhaled, avoiding her eyes. "I'm saying I'm done. I'm done trying to scale the walls you put up." He lifted his gaze then, and those usually warm brown eyes were shining with unshed tears and months, maybe years, of pent-up hurt. "I love you. God knows I do. But you won't let me in, Mia. You won't let anyone in." "That's not true," she snapped, more sharply than she intended. A flash of anger flared to life, a reflex to mask the fear underneath. "You're in. You've been in." Her voice faltered. The kitchen felt too quiet, too still. Even the night outside seemed to be holding its breath. Jake shook his head slowly. Number, I've been standing at your door this whole time, and you keep it bolted. You're so damn tough all the time. So independent. You act like you don't need me or anyone. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the harsh scrape of his fingers on his scalp. I get it, okay? You're a rancher's daughter. You had to be tough to hold your own out here, with your family, in your world. I fell in love with that strength. His voice broke a little on the word love, and Mia felt her throat tighten. He continued, words pouring out now like a dam had burst. Psst. But somewhere along the line, I started to feel more like a sparring partner than a boyfriend. Every time I tried to help you, to be there for you, you pushed me away. You're so used to doing everything on your own, you won't even let me be there for you. He looked at her, pleading. Do you know how it feels to constantly be shut out? To never be allowed to share your burdens, even a little? Mia uncrossed her arms, palms flat on the counter behind her as if for support. Her legs felt unsteady. I never meant to shut you out, she said, voice strained and softer now. This was not how she wanted this conversation to go. She had imagined anger, shouting maybe, but not this raw, vulnerable honesty from Jake that left her defenses feeling woefully inadequate. I'm just used to handling things. I didn't realize. That's exactly it, he interrupted gently, sadness tinging his tone. You didn't even realize. It's second nature for you to never ask for help, never show weakness. Hell, even when you sprained your ankle last fall, you refused to let me carry you off the trail. You limped 5 miles rather than lean on me. She opened her mouth to protest, but he gave a weary chuckle and held up a hand. I know. You didn't want to be a burden. You never do. But Mia? I wanted to help you. I wanted to feel like we were a team, and you wouldn't let me. A tear finally escaped his eye, trailing down his cheek, and he wiped it away, angrily. Mia's own eyes stung, her chest tight as if bound by barbed wire. Seeing him cry was unbearable because she knew he wasn't a man who cried easily. This was breaking him, and in turn, it was breaking her. Jake, please, she whispered, taking a step forward. I can do better. I know I'm stubborn. I know I have walls. But I can. He raised his head and his expression stopped her mid-sentence. It was full of love, yes, but also resolve, a heartbreaking resolve. It's not about doing better, he said softly. This is who you are. I would never want to change your strength or your stubborn streak a mile wide. His voice caught and he gave a half smile at that, recalling the words he'd used to teasingly describe her countless times. But I think you need someone who doesn't need what I need. And maybe I'm not strong enough to be that person. Mia felt a sob rising and clamped it down. Her whole life, she had practiced not crying. You're saying I'm too hard for you to love? That you're giving up on us because I'm not soft enough? There was a bitterness in her tone now, her pride stung even as her heart bled. Quiet femininity. She had it in her. In the way she'd leave wildflowers on his truck seat or the gentle kisses she'd give him under the stars. But it never seemed like enough in moments like this. Jake looked stricken. Number Mia, I love your softness, the side of you rarely show. What? Like when you sang to the injured colt all night or when you curl up against me on the porch swing after everyone's gone to bed. I know it's there. But you act like you have to prove you're as tough as any man, even with me. Like if you let that guard down, you'll lose yourself. He paused, breathing shakily. I never wanted you to be anything other than yourself. I just wanted to be let in. And I'm at the end of my rope trying. Mia flinched at the phrase end of my rope, given how literally she'd be at the end of one later on the mountain. But that night she only felt a desperate panic. She crossed the small distance between them and grabbed his hands, uncaring that he could probably feel her trembling. Her voice broke open, raw and pleading, the vulnerability she usually kept hidden now spilling out. Don't do this, please. I know I push people away. I'm scared, Jake. The tears came then, one slipping down her cheek. I'm scared that if I let you in completely, you'll see parts of me that even I don't like. That you'll leave. Everyone leaves. He listened, his face crumpling as she finally spoke the truth from her heart. Gently, he squeezed her hands. Mia, I'm not everyone. I wanted to stay. I would have, if you could have trusted me. He swallowed hard, but I feel like I'm already mostly gone from your life, like you never truly let me be a part of it. I'm sorry, but I can't keep trying to scale a wall that has no holds. She shook her head, more tears spilling. In the back of her mind, a voice noted how ironic his choice of words was. Climbing metaphors. Scale a wall with no holds. It struck her even in that awful moment. But his hands were slipping from hers now, and a wave of helplessness crashed over her. Jake, please, she choked out once more, voice barely above a whisper. His eyes, overflowing with love and sorrow, met hers. He reached up and gently brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb, a tender gesture that nearly undid her completely. I'm sorry, he murmured. Then he leaned forward and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead. She closed her eyes, tears leaking out at the edges, her hands clutching his shirt as if she could anchor him here. For a second, it felt like he might hold her, and everything would be all right. But he stepped back. The warmth of him receded, and cold air rushed into the space between them. Mia opened her eyes to see Jake turning away, wiping his own face. He grabbed his jacket off the chair. I'll always love you, he said thickly, voice breaking, but I have to go. And with that, he walked out of the kitchen door into the night, leaving Mia standing there shattered and alone, the screen door banging softly shut behind him. She had stood frozen for what felt like hours after he left, tears streaming silently until the numbness gave way to an unbearable ache. That ache had eventually driven her out too, grabbing her truck keys and a half-formed plan to drown her pain in altitude and adrenaline. She fled to the only place that had ever made sense when nothing else did, the mountains. No surrender. A violent shiver rippled through Mia's body as the memory of Jake's departure faded and the brutal present came rushing back in. Her fingers had gone almost completely numb. She realized with a stab of alarm that she didn't remember the last few seconds clearly. She'd been so lost in the flashback that she'd nearly disassociated from her body clinging to the cliff. In that lapse of focus, her grip had weakened. One foot had already slipped off its paltry hold and was dangling uselessly. Her arms screamed with strain as she hastily tried to readjust, hugging the wall. The sky had darkened to a deep indigo, the last afterglow of sunset barely illuminating the rock now. How long had she been up here? Too long. Far too long. Panic fluttered in her chest as she flexed her nearly frozen fingers, trying to coax feeling back into them. If full night fell, she'd be climbing blind, and if she didn't find a solution before then, she wouldn't be climbing at all. Mia pressed her forehead to the cold stone, gasping a few quick breaths. Every muscle in her body was trembling now, a fine, uncontrollable shake from adrenaline overload and sheer fatigue. She could feel it, the slow failing of her strength. This was the tipping point. Either she found a way off this wall or... No, she whispered to the emptiness, her voice hoarse and raw. She refused to finish that thought. Think, Mia, think. Above, that elusive ledge still taunted her. It was so close and yet impossibly far for her current position. She tried to recall if there were any other holds within reach. Maybe something to the side? Turning her head gingerly, she let her eyes search the rock to her right. Just inches beyond her reach, a thin crack ran vertically. It was too narrow to jam her fingers in, but maybe she could use it for balance if she could get a foot over. Shifting her weight carefully, Mia began a desperate maneuver. She eased her right foot off its tiny nub and swung it sideways, attempting to plant it on a slight indentation near that crack. The move forced her to cling one-handed again for a heartbeat, and her left arm nearly gave out. She gritted her teeth, muscles straining as she found purchase for her toe in the crack, pressing it in. The position was awkward, but now if she could straighten that right leg, she might propel herself just enough to grab the higher ledge with one hand. It was an insane move to attempt in her condition, a dynamic lunge when she was already exhausted. But it was either that, or slowly lose strength and fall anyway. At least this way she was doing something. Mia inhaled sharply, summoning what little strength remained. With a guttural cry, she pushed up hard with her right leg and simultaneously released her left hand, springing upward. For an eternal fraction of a second, she was airborne, nothing tethering her to the cliff but momentum and hope. Her right arm shot up, reaching for the protruding ledge above. Her fingertips brushed it, briefly, tantalizingly, and then her weary muscles betrayed her. Her grasp missed by a hair. Instead of a solid hold, her fingers scraped uselessly along the rock before losing contact. Time slowed to a syrupy crawl. Mia's stomach plummeted as she felt herself slipping backwards, her body peeling away from the wall. An involuntary scream tore from her throat, echoing into the chasm. For a microsecond, she was in freefall. Instinct and muscle memory kicked in at the last possible instant. As her body fell away, Mia's left hand flailed out and miraculously snagged the lip of the original ledge, the same meager ledge she'd been holding all along. Her arm wrenched violently as it caught her entire falling weight. Pain detonated in her shoulder and fingers. Two of her fingertips slipped off, leaving only 3 digits of her left hand clinging to that edge now, her feet swinging in empty air. She slammed into the rock face, chest and knees scraping painfully against unforgiving stone. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs in a harsh grunt. For a moment, bright sparks danced in her vision from the shock and pain. But she didn't lose consciousness. Fate or sheer stubbornness wouldn't allow it. Now Mia hung one-handed, injured and weaker than ever. She tried to bring her right hand back up to the ledge, but found she couldn't immediately. Her right arm dangled useless. When she tried to lift it, agony seared through her shoulder. She wasn't sure if she'd pulled a muscle or worse, but it felt like fire. "No, no, no!" she moaned through clenched teeth, kicking her feet against the blank wall to try and stabilize herself. She managed to swing her right foot back onto that slight nubbin of rock by pure luck, which stopped her pendulum swing. Her body was pressed once more against the cliff, but now even more precariously than before. Hot tears of pain and frustration blurred her sight. The 3 fingers of her left hand that still clung were perilously close to sliding off. She could feel the skin tearing, blood smearing on the rock. Her index finger had split open at the pad, either cut by the sharp edge or popped from the strain. She couldn't tell which. The stinging was intense, but she barely registered it over the screaming burn in her shoulder and forearm. This was it. She had thrown everything she had into that leap, and it hadn't been enough. Now she was in an even worse position, one hand barely holding on, body dangling. The ledge above remained out of reach, as indifferent as the fading light. The mountain seemed to loom over her, uncaring and immense. A sob racked her chest, and this time she couldn't hold it back. Defeat, raw and cold, coiled around her heart. I can't do it. The thought surfaced like poison. I'm going to die here. She pictured the headline, "Local woman dies in climbing accident." They would call it an accident, not knowing she had basically walked into it willingly, driven by heartbreak and recklessness. How stupid, how senseless. Jake's face flashed in her mind again, not in anger this time, but in sorrow. She imagined how he'd react when he got the news. Would he blame himself? Would he even find out? Or had he already distanced himself so much that she was just another person he used to know? The pain in her body became entwined with the pain in her heart, until it was an indistinguishable ache that consumed her. Mia squeezed her eyes shut, tears leaking freely now. She had never felt so small, so beaten. All her life she had fought to be strong, to be brave, to never surrender. But hanging here in the darkness, utterly alone, she found herself wondering what the point of all that struggle was. What had being strong gotten her? A broken heart and a possible lonely death on a mountainside. Below her, nothing but darkness and oblivion. In that moment, the idea of letting go, of simply releasing her aching fingers and ending it swiftly, seduced her weary mind. It would be so easy. A final act of surrender. One moment of pain, and then peace. The fight would be over. The heartbreak would be over. She wouldn't have to feel this heavy burden anymore. Not the fire in her muscles, nor the ice in her soul, since Jake left. Mia's eyelids fluttered as she imagined the relief of it. Just letting go. The wind would catch her for a few seconds, and then, no, she rasped out loud, startling herself. The sound echoed off the rock face. Her eyes snapped open, fury and fear flooding back in. Where had that come from? That voice wasn't just hers. It sounded like... She heard it then in her mind, as clearly as if he were beside her. Her father's booming voice, rough but loving, the way he'd shouted at her when she was a little girl learning to ride. "Never give up, Mia, you hear me? We don't quit when things get tough." Her heart lurched, a new surge of adrenaline sparking. She couldn't quit. She wouldn't quit. She hadn't fought through everything in her life just to give up now, at the bitter end. Her father's voice, her own voice, Jake's voice, all merged into a cacophony in her head, urging her to hold on just a little longer, to fight a little harder. Mia blinked away her tears. Her vision cleared enough to see her left hand still miraculously clamped to the ledge, though her grip was weakening every second. With a ragged breath, she pressed her forehead to the rock and prayed to whoever might be listening, "Give me strength, please." In the silence that followed, a memory stirred. A different time, a different cliff of sorts, and a voice that had guided her through fear before. Flashback, a father's lesson. A hazy summer afternoon on the ranch years ago. Mia was about 14, gangly and grass-stained, with a scrape on her chin and tears of frustration burning her eyes. She had just been thrown off a young chestnut mare named Sugarfoot, a horse she'd boasted she could break herself. Now she stood behind the barn, out of sight of the ranch hands and her brothers, furiously wiping at her eyes with dusty hands. Her pride hurt far worse than the bruises forming on her hip and shoulder. She could still hear the distant whoops of the cowboys in the corral, one of her older brothers likely joking about little Mia biting the dust. She kicked a clod of dirt hard, her boot sending it arcing away. Humiliation and anger warred within her. She wanted to storm into the house and never come out, to hide from the snickers. Part of her never wanted to see that damn horse again. Maybe I'm not cut out for this, she thought bitterly, chewing her lower lip. Maybe I should stick to safer things, like Ma's kitchen chores. The thought made her stomach twist in self-disgust. She was a rancher's daughter. She was supposed to be tough as rawhide, but right now she felt as fragile as a hummingbird egg. Lost in her stewing, she didn't hear footsteps until a broad shadow stretched next to hers. She hastily scrubbed a sleeve over her eyes, pretending to inspect the saddle that lay discarded on the ground. "Mia." Her father's voice was a deep baritone, touched with the gravel of years of barking orders over the roar of cattle and tractors. She froze. Of all people, he was the last she wanted to witness her moment of defeat. She braced herself for a lecture, or worse, gentle pity. Slowly, she turned to face him, keeping her chin jutted out in defiance despite the quiver in it. "I know, Dad," she blurted before he could speak. "I got thrown. I messed up." She sniffed hard, willing the tears to stay back. "Go on, say it. I shouldn't have tried to break her on my own." Her father, Bill, regarded her with those steely blue eyes that missed nothing. He wasn't a man of many words usually. A tilt of his Stetson or a single nod often conveyed whole sentences. Right now he stood with hands on his hips, a stance she recognized as his concerned but trying to look stern pose. He glanced at the saddle on the ground, then at his daughter's dirt-smudged face and trembling lower lip. "Hurts, doesn't it?" he said finally, nodding toward her presumably sore backside. Mia swallowed and looked down, ashamed. She managed a tiny nod. Her whole left side ached from where she hit the ground, and she'd bitten her tongue on impact. Her mouth still tasted like blood. Her father stepped closer and, to her surprise, gently lifted her chin with his calloused hand. Ain't no shame in hurting, girl, he said, voice low. Ain't no shame in falling neither. Everyone gets thrown sooner or later. She met his eyes, which had softened with understanding. I almost had her, Daddy, Mia said, her voice cracking. The admission of almost felt like defeat all over again. She got spooked and I lost my seat. The guys are all laughing. Let 'em laugh, Bill interjected sharply, a protective anger flashing across his face on his daughter's behalf. They've all been in your boots. If they act high and mighty, they've forgotten how the dirt tastes. He bent and picked up her scuffed cowboy hat from the dirt. After dusting it off against his denim thigh, he handed it back to her. Question is, what are you going to do now? Mia took the hat, turning it in her hands. It was a simple question, but she knew the weight behind it. She stared at the hat's frayed brim. I don't know, she murmured. The truth was, she was scared to get back on that horse. Sugarfoot was young and jittery, and the brief ride earlier had been a whirlwind of speed and fear before the world flipped and slammed her into the ground. Her hands trembled slightly at the memory. Bill glanced toward the corral where the mare in question was being held by one of the ranch hands, still saddled and skittish. He then looked back at Mia. You think your old man never got tossed? He asked. Hell, first time I tried to break a bronc, I ended up with a busted arm and more bruises than a rotten apple. He chuckled dryly. Thought I'd never want to see a horse again after that. Mia's eyes widened in surprise. Her father rarely talked about his failures. What did you do? He fixed her with a steady gaze. Next morning, sling and all, I marched out and finished the job. Had someone boost me up since I couldn't pull myself into the saddle, and I rode that bronc until it quit bucking. A small smile tugged at his lips. Scared out of my wits the whole time, mind you. But I wasn't about to let fear win, and I wasn't going to let that horse think it had the better of me. Mia tried to imagine her father, the near legend who seemed unbreakable to her, as a young man with a broken arm climbing onto a wild horse. The image was equal parts terrifying and inspiring. He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Mia, listen, you're stubborn, just like me. That can get you hurt, sure. But it also means you've got grit. You don't quit when things get tough. And I know damn well you don't want to walk away from Sugarfoot now. She felt fresh tears gathering, but now they were tears of conflicted emotion, relief that he understood, fear of what she had to do, and a budding determination fueled by his words. Her father's voice gentled even more, so quiet she almost had to strain to hear. It's okay to be scared. Courage isn't not being scared. It's doing what you gotta do even when you are. He tilted his head toward the corral. Now, I can have one of the boys finish breaking that filly if you tell me to. No one would think less of you for it, not after the ride she gave you. But I see something in your eyes, kid. You're not licked yet, are ya? Mia wiped her face on her sleeve, leaving a dusty streak on her cheek, but not caring. The trembling in her hands was subsiding, replaced by a familiar fire in her belly. The one that always flared when someone doubted her, even if that someone was herself. She shook her head slowly, then with more conviction. No, sir, she said, voice stronger. Bill's stern face broke into a proud grin. Without another word, he threw an arm around her shoulders and guided her back toward the corral. Each step still hurt, but Mia squared her shoulders and limped forward with resolve. Back at the fence, a couple of the ranch hands looked over, curiosity on their faces at seeing the boss and his daughter returning. Sugarfoot stamped the ground nervously inside the pen, ears flicking. Mia's heart hammered at the sight of the horse that had tossed her, but she inhaled deeply and climbed up onto the bottom fence rung. Her father gave her a leg up, literally hoisting her by the waist as she placed a boot in the stirrup and swung herself gingerly into the saddle. Her body protested with pain, but Mia set her jaw. She gripped the reins, steadying herself. Bill had stepped back, hands off now, simply watching with unwavering faith in his daughter. Sugarfoot danced under her slightly, sensing her residual nerves. Mia forced herself to exhale slowly, just like her dad had taught her when gentling spooked animals. Easy, girl. Easy, she whispered, leaning forward to stroke the mare's neck the way she'd seen her mom do with anxious horses. The mare snorted, but after a moment, settled. "That's it," Bill called out softly from the fence, pride evident in his tone. Mia tightened her legs around the horse's flanks and clicked her tongue, urging Sugarfoot into a tentative trot. The mare resisted at first with a few stiff half-bucks, clearly testing if this young rider was as determined as before. Mia's bruised body ached with each jolt, but she held firm, remembering her father's words, "You've got grit. You don't quit." After a few tense moments, Sugarfoot yielded, moving into a smoother canter around the enclosure. Mia felt a triumphant grin tug at her face, tears of relief threatening to blur her vision again, but this time for a different reason. She had done it, despite the fear, despite the pain. She'd climbed back on. Her father let out a whoop and clapped one of the ranch hands on the back, as if to say, "See, that's my girl." The others who had laughed earlier now tipped their hats in respect, some giving approving hollers of their own. But the only thing that mattered to Mia in that moment was the glowing pride in her father's face as she guided Sugarfoot to a halt and carefully dismounted. Bill met her as she landed on the ground, and before she could decide if hugging him was too childish, he pulled her into a tight embrace. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The solid warmth of that hug and the steady beat of his heart against her ear said enough. When he released her, he placed his big hands on her shoulders and looked her dead in the eye. "Remember this feeling, Mia," he said firmly. "Remember what you can do when you don't give up." She nodded, voice sure. "I will, Daddy." And she had. Through broken bones, through tough seasons on the ranch, through the challenges of proving herself time and again, Mia had held that lesson close. Never give up. We don't quit when things get tough. It was as much a part of her as the blood in her veins. One last move. Back in the darkness on the cliff, Mia's eyes snapped open from the vivid memory. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Remember what you can do when you don't give up." A fierce determination took root in her chest, igniting a second wind. She wasn't done yet. Breathing as steadily as she could, Mia assessed her situation with newfound clarity. Her left hand was still clinging to the small ledge, though only just. Her right arm hung, shaking and in pain, but not unusable. She flexed the fingers of her right hand slowly. The shoulder protested, but she could move it. Carefully, she reached behind her with her right hand to the small chalk bag still miraculously tied at her waist. Her movements were slow and deliberate. Any sudden jerk could pry her remaining grip loose. 2 fingertips dipped into the soft magnesium powder. She pressed her lips together to stifle a whimper as her left fingers began to slip a millimeter. Quickly, she brought her right hand forward and back onto the ledge, replacing 2 of her left fingers with her freshly chalked right ones in one smooth, desperate motion. Now her left hand was free for a moment, and she immediately plunged it into the chalk bag, coating the sweat and blood-slick skin. Her right hand held her weight just long enough for her to shake out her left arm, trying to loosen the cramps. Then she re-established her left hand on the hold. For the first time in minutes, she had both hands on the ledge again, this time with a slightly better grip, thanks to the chalk drying her sweat and her mind steadied by resolve. Mia inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the cold night air. It hurt. Everything hurt, but pain meant she was alive, and where there's life, there's hope. She adjusted her footing, finding that tiny nub with her right toes once more, and even discovered a subtle divot for her left foot by feel, a feature she hadn't noticed in her panic before. It wasn't much, but it was something to push against. Above, she could barely make out the outline of the thicker ledge in the starlight. The moon hadn't risen yet, leaving the mountain in darkness save for the faintest shimmer of snow on distant peaks and a spatter of stars overhead. She felt more than saw the rock around her, but her mind was clear. The fear was still there, her heart still hammered, and her muscles were still trembling. But it was under a layer of calm focus. A strange peace, even. If this was going to be her last attempt, she would make it count. No holding back, no hesitation. Mia thought of Jake, of the future that might still await if she survived the next few minutes. Maybe a chance to mend things, or at least to tell him that she understood now. She thought of her father, of how proud he would be to see her fighting with every ounce of strength. She thought of herself, of the little girl who climbed back on the horse, of the woman who refused to be defined by failure or fear. Her lips, cracked and dry, curled into the faintest semblance of a grin. "Not done yet," she whispered into the dark. Hand over hand, she inched her grip slightly wider on the ledge, spreading the load. She bent her knees just a bit, coiling like a spring. The better footing she'd found gave her a scant measure of purchase. This is it. She visualized the move in her mind, seeing herself lunging upward, grabbing hold of the ledge above, pulling herself up to safety. She imagined it as if it were already done, as if watching a scene in a film. The mountain was silent, as if it too were watching, waiting to see what she would do. Mia let out a slow breath, then drew in one more deep gulp of air. Her muscles tensed. With a guttural, primal yell that tore from the depths of her soul, Mia exploded into motion. She drove hard with her legs and yanked with her arms, propelling herself upward into the darkness. Her right arm swung out, fingers outstretched, reaching for the ledge that held salvation or doom. For one eternal moment, Mia was airborne, a solitary figure silhouetted against the starry sky. Her fate balanced on the edge of stone and the tips of her fingers. She felt her hand make contact with the rock above. Everything hung in the balance, teetering on that precarious brink between holding on and letting go, between falling and flying, between life and death. Thank you for spending a little time with us. Hope you enjoyed it. Please follow us for more stories that need to be told, and share this with others who may also enjoy. Thank you. This is Past Now Read. Until next time, make it all good. Oh, here's another ending for your enjoyment. She chalked her fingers, flexed her feet, and jumped. Her hand slapped stone, a grunt, a scrape, fingernails catching rock. Then, silence.